I'm Anita Taylor. I was in the Department of Communication, retired as Professor Emerita in 2005, actually fall of 2000, December 2004. I do not know the year of beginning because I don't remember exactly when we got started, but I was among those who were here at the beginning. And I started teaching gender and communication in 1986. Well, started out, I was a faculty member, as almost all of us were, except the person we persuaded to accept the role of director, which meant she got a course release, I think, to do a whole lot of organizing and leading. I think we came up with a sort of constitution or guiding set of principles that created a women's studies faculty, but most of us were still in departments because there really wasn't a women's studies faculty line at the time. And what would happen is that when we would teach a women's studies class, then women's studies would buy a part-time replacement for us in our departments. So my position always was member of the women's studies faculty, but paid for and housed in the Department of Communication. The first person that we persuaded to be the director, which, as I said, she got a one-course release in order to do the organizing, was Karen Rosenblum. She then worked with Gilbert and the person who was heading the student services program at the time to get a student services position that would be a women's center director or a person to head and lead the women's center, and that person was Rose Pasquarel, who had been a sociology major and worked with Karen. So those two together did a lot of the daily creative labor to get it started. There were many fewer women on the faculty in those days, and we were often isolated in our own departments. And even when we had women in our departments, they weren't always women who were interested in gender studies. So having the chance to interact on a regular basis with women who were interested in the same kinds of things that I was. And it wasn't too long before we started having some men who were interested in that as well. And in our field, that's history and how people communicate with each other and all those kinds of things. And it was all done on predominantly men. And that we wanted to put women back into the field of communication. And we did that because we were all talking at that time about Carol Gilligan's In a Different Voice. And that got me started on doing gender and communication, and because I was doing what is essentially a women's studies course, I subsequently did some women in history and the history of women's rhetoric. I was a natural fit for women's studies. The most memorable things that we did, and Rose Pasquarel, I think, deserves a lot of credit for this. She started the Take Back the Night operations very early, and those basically rallies and marches were bringing together students and faculty in a way that there's nothing else that I knew of on the campus that did. And that pretty soon hooked up with the Clothesline Project, and that is a very moving and memorable kind of thing, pushed a lot by Connie. Names are escaping me tonight, but Connie, who was here for years. Tell me, help me.
Connie Kirkland.
Yes, Connie Kirkland, who really worked on the anti-violence aspect and was really important in developing the whole idea, which is now an accepted part of Mason tradition, and that is, fighting back against the violence, the whole anti-violence week. So, this is what happens to women. Women's stories tend to disappear because women's history isn't considered important. And it's really important that we tell these stories and that we keep them. And that's why I was pleased when you said you wanted to include my voice in these interviews, and I'm even more pleased that you're doing the interviews, because keeping this information and archiving is terribly important.